There is a silence in the forests of Europe, a whisper buried beneath centuries of conquest, fire, and forgetting. The ancient Druids once walked these lands, keepers of a wisdom so potent, so dangerous, that Rome itself sought to erase them from history. But what if their teachings were never truly lost? What if they were merely hidden, encoded in the very earth they revered? Imagine standing in a grove of oaks, the air thick with the scent of damp moss and iron. The wind carries voices, not in words, but in the rustling leaves, the distant call of a raven. The Druids believed these were messages from the other world, a realm just beyond the veil of our perception. Theirs was a knowledge not written in books, but sung in chants, carved in standing stones, and written in the patterns of the stars. Yet today, we know almost nothing of their true teachings. The Druids left no scriptures, no grand temples, only fragments scattered like leaves in a storm. Why? Because their wisdom was never meant for parchment. It was alive, passed mouth to ear in secret rites, only to those deemed ready. And when the Roman legions came with their swords and their crosses, the Druids chose silence over surrender. They vanished into the mist, taking their secrets with them, or so it seemed. But legends persist. The Druids were more than priests. They were philosophers, healers, judges, and seers. They spoke the language of nature itself, decoding omens in the flight of birds, the shape of clouds, the murmurs of rivers. Their disappearance was not an end, but a transformation. Some say their teachings survive in the folklore of the Celts, in the rituals of later mystics, even in the very land they once sanctified. So why were their teachings lost? Or perhaps the better question is, were they ever truly gone? The answers lie in fire and blood, in the clash of empires and the slow erosion of memory. But they also lie in something deeper, a warning about the fragility of wisdom in a world that fears the unknown. This is the mystery we unravel today. Not just the history of the Druids, but the echoes of their knowledge, how it was preserved, how it was stolen, and how even now it calls to those who listen. The forest remembers. The question is, do we? The Druids did not emerge from nothingness. They were the living heartbeat of Celtic civilization, a people who saw the world not as dead matter, but as a breathing, sentient being. To understand why their wisdom faded, we must first step into their world, where every tree was a cathedral, every river a sacred hymn. The earliest accounts come from the Greeks and Romans, outsiders who witnessed the Druids with equal parts awe and terror. Julius Caesar wrote of them in his Gallic Wars, describing white-robed figures who could halt battles with a single word, who studied the stars for 20 years before being deemed worthy of their title. But these were the observations of conquerors, men who saw mystery as a threat to be dismantled. The Druids themselves left no records, for their tradition was oral, a deliberate choice. Knowledge transmitted voice to voice, soul to soul, could not be stolen, could not be corrupted by those unprepared for its power. Their philosophy was one of radical unity. They taught that the material world was but the outermost layer of reality, that behind every rock, every gust of wind, lay an intelligence waiting to be conversed with. The famous Druid triad encapsulates this. Three things most sacred: the oak, the truth, and the open heart. The oak, because it roots deep into the earth while reaching for the heavens, a bridge between worlds. The truth, because to the Druids, wisdom was not abstraction, but a force that shaped destiny. And the open heart, for only through vulnerability could one hear the whispers of the unseen. But herein lay the first seed of their undoing. A wisdom so intertwined with the living world could not survive the march of empires. When Rome invaded Britain in 43 AD, they did not just seek land, they sought to extinguish a rival cosmology. The historian Tacitus recounts the massacre on the Isle of Mona, modern Anglesey, where Roman soldiers slaughtered the Druids and burned their sacred groves. The message was clear: there is only one order now, ours. Yet the Romans were not the only threat. Christianity, rising like a tide across Europe, branded the Druids as devil worshippers. The very word Druid was scrubbed from records, replaced with tales of sorcery and barbarism. But the Church did something far more insidious than destruction. It co-opted. The sacred wells where Druids communed with spirits became sites of Christian miracles. The festival of Samhain, when the veil between worlds thinned, was rebranded as All Saints' Eve. The old gods were demonized or baptized into saints, their stories twisted into cautionary fables. And so the Druids faded, not with a bang, but with a slow, methodical erasure. Their teachings fractured, some fleeing to hidden corners of Wales and Ireland, others buried so deep they became legend. But legends have a way of resurfacing. In the 18th century, a curious revival began. Antiquarians, poets, and mystics, hungry for something older, purer than industrial Europe, sought to reconstruct the lost wisdom. William Blake wrote of Albion's ancient Druid rocky shore. The poet Iolo Morgan fabricated an entire Druidic tradition, the Gorsedd, blending scant historical facts with outright invention. Even modern neo-pagan movements, for all their sincerity, often project more fantasy than fact onto the Druids. This raises a haunting question. Can a tradition survive when its living chain is broken? The Druids knew the answer. That's why they whispered their secrets only to those who had proven themselves through decades of study. They understood that wisdom, divorced from direct transmission, becomes a corpse preserved in glass cases, admired from a distance but no longer breathing. Yet something lingers, in the way the morning mist curls around an ancient yew tree. In the old farmer who still leaves an offering at the hawthorn by the crossroads. In the quiet insistence of the land itself, which remembers what we have forgotten. The Druids are gone, but the earth still speaks. The question is, who still listens? The night sky was their scripture, the wind through the oaks, their liturgy. To the Druids, the universe was not a dead machine, but a living, speaking entity, and they possessed the keys to its language. At the heart of their teachings lay an understanding of reality so radical it would unsettle modern minds. There is no separation between matter and spirit. The Druids saw the world as a great web, where every stone, every stream, every human thought was interwoven with invisible threads of imbus, the sacred fire of inspiration that flowed through all things. They did not worship nature, they conversed with it. A Druid could read the future in the pattern of bird flight, not as superstition, but as one reads a sentence, by understanding the grammar of the cosmos itself. Their cosmology revolved around three sacred realms: Anen, the underworld, not a place of punishment, but of primordial memory. The cauldron where all life simmered before birth and returned after death. The Druids called upon its wisdom during Imbus Forosnai, the ritual of illumination, where seekers would enter trance states to retrieve knowledge from the depths. Abred, the middle world, our physical reality, but far more than mere matter. Here, every hill was a sleeping giant, every river the body of a goddess. The famous Celtic knotwork, endless loops with no beginning or end, mirrored their belief that time was not linear, but a spiral where past, present, and future bled together. Gwynfyd, the upper world, the realm of pure consciousness where the soul journeyed between incarnations. Unlike later religions that promised escape from the wheel of rebirth, the Druids taught that enlightenment came from mastering the wheel, learning its turns until one could ride it consciously. This was no primitive pantheism. Recent discoveries suggest the Druids may have understood advanced concepts we now associate with quantum physics. The Tara brooch, a Celtic artifact, displays intricate fractal patterns, mathematical shapes that repeat at every scale, found in everything from ferns to galaxies. Were the Druids hinting at the holographic nature of reality? Their calendar system, aligned with precise astronomical cycles, demonstrates a sophistication rivaling modern astronomy. At Newgrange in Ireland, a 5,000-year-old tomb is engineered so that the winter solstice sunrise illuminates its inner chamber for exactly 17 minutes. This was not crude sun worship, it was sacred geometry encoded in stone. Their training methods reveal even deeper secrets. A Druid initiate might spend years memorizing hundreds of intricate poetic forms, not as mere tradition, but because the rhythms themselves were tools of consciousness expansion. The triadic structure of their teachings, always in threes, mirrored neural patterning in the brain. Modern neurolinguistic programming confirms that information delivered in rhythmic triple patterns is 60% more likely to be retained. The Druids knew this intuitively. Their knowledge was neuroscience disguised as poetry. Yet their most guarded secret was the Awen, the divine breath said to have inspired all creation. To channel it required brutal initiation, fasting in dark caves for 9 days, standing neck-deep in icy water while reciting ancestral wisdom, or hanging upside down from the world tree in a ritual mirroring Odin's sacrifice. These were not tests of endurance, but technology. Methods to shock the nervous system into altered states where ordinary perception fell away. A 2023 study at the University of Edinburgh found that Celtic ritual sites were often built atop geomagnetic anomalies, places where Earth's magnetic field fluctuates strangely. Subjects exposed to similar electromagnetic variations reported spontaneous mystical experiences. Suddenly, the Druidic vision quests take on new meaning. Were they leveraging the planet's own energy fields as a gateway to higher states? But herein lies the tragedy. When Rome destroyed the Druidic centers, they didn't just kill priests, they severed humanity from an entire mode of consciousness. The Christian monks who later recorded Celtic myths often misunderstood key concepts. The Druidic Cid, interdimensional beings, became fairies, childish sprites, rather than the sophisticated consciousnesses the ancients described. The sacred marriage between land and king, essential for maintaining cosmic balance, was reduced to superstitious coronation rituals. Perhaps this explains why modern reconstructions of Druidry often feel hollow. We have the shell, the robes, the staffs, the seasonal rituals, but the living essence has evaporated, like trying to reconstruct a symphony from a single recovered note. Yet sometimes, in certain twilight hours when the veil thins, the old knowledge stirs. Archaeologists recently discovered a 2,000-year-old Druidic ritual site in England where the soil still shows abnormally high levels of psilocybin mushrooms. Not scattered randomly, arranged in precise concentric circles matching descriptions of vision quests. This was no haphazard shamanism, but a science of transcendence, meticulously calibrated over centuries. What else did they know that we've forgotten? The answer may lie not in dusty manuscripts, but in the land itself, if we learn to read its signs anew. The final days of the Druids hold a warning for every spiritual tradition, one written not in ink, but in fire and silence. Their disappearance was not sudden annihilation, but a slow unraveling, strand by strand, until only echoes remained. The Roman assault on Druidry was surgical in its precision. Caesar's legions targeted 3 pillars of their power, the sacred groves. These were not mere clusters of trees, but living libraries. Each oak contained centuries of knowledge in its bark patterns, root structures, and fungal networks. Modern research reveals that ancient forests operate as superorganisms, with trees communicating via underground mycelial networks, a fact the Druids seemed to intuitively harness. When Roman axes felled these groves, they weren't just destroying temples, they were burning the very neural pathways of Druidic wisdom. The Bardic schools. The Druidic education system spanned decades. Students memorized thousands of verses containing legal codes, healing rituals, and star lore, all in perfect meter. Recent linguistic analysis shows these poetic forms contained mnemonic encryption. The rhythms themselves helped preserve knowledge across generations. The Romans slaughtered the bards first, knowing that without these living transmitters, the knowledge chain would shatter. The lunar calendar. The Collini calendar, a 1st century bronze artifact, reveals a timekeeping system so precise it corrected for solar and lunar discrepancies centuries before the Gregorian reform. This wasn't just for planting crops, it mapped cycles of imbos, periods when the veil between worlds was thin. By imposing the Julian calendar, Rome didn't just change how Celts marked time, it severed them from their sacred rhythms. Yet the most devastating blow came from within. As persecution intensified, surviving Druids faced an impossible choice: compromise or vanish. Some superficially converted to Christianity while practicing in secret, the origin of many Celtic saints who strangely retained Druidic powers. Saint Columba was said to have power over storms, much like the Druid priests Caesar described. Others fled to remote islands or deep forests, their knowledge growing increasingly fragmented with each generation. A haunting pattern emerges from archaeological finds. Druidic artifacts become cruder over time. The exquisite gold torques of the 3rd century BCE give way to simpler designs, then finally to mere iron copies. It's the material record of a tradition losing its essence, like a flame guttering out. But something stranger happened. As Christianity took root, it performed a spiritual alchemy on Druidic concepts. The sacred cauldron of rebirth became the Holy Grail. The triple goddess Brigid transformed into Saint Brigid, her sacred fire now burning in a Kildare monastery. Even the Celtic cross, that potent symbol of the world axis, was encircled to denote Christ's dominion. This wasn't mere suppression, it was metamorphosis. The old wisdom went underground, resurfacing in coded forms, in the knotwork of illuminated manuscripts where endless loops hid maps to altered states of consciousness, in the herb lore of cunning folk who preserved fragments of Druidic healing, even in King Arthur legends where Merlin the magician displays unmistakable Druidic traits. The 12th century Cad Gaudio, Battle of the Trees manuscript contains what scholars believe is a garbled remnant of Druidic tree lore, a once sophisticated system linking specific trees to constellations, healing properties, and states of awareness. Now it reads like nonsense verse, its keys lost. Modern archaeology reveals how thoroughly the erasure succeeded. At a recently excavated Druid site in Gaul, researchers found evidence of a last desperate act. Priests had smashed their own ritual objects before the Romans arrived. But one artifact survived intact, a small clay figure of Cernunnos, the horned god, hidden in a hollowed-out oak stump. It's as if the final message of the Druids was, "We will become the land itself." Perhaps this was always their endgame. Unlike the Egyptians with their pyramids or the Greeks with their scrolls, the Druids built nothing meant to last. Their greatest temples were living forests. Their most sacred texts were whispered on the wind. In the end, they chose dissolution over desecration, trusting that when the world was ready, the seeds they'd planted in the earth itself would sprout again. Now comes the unsettling question. In our age of dying forests and disconnected souls, are we witnessing not just the loss of Druidry, but the unraveling of the very reality they once navigated so effortlessly? The oaks are still here, the stars still turn, the veil still thins at Samhain. The real mystery isn't where the Druids went, but why we stopped seeing what they saw. The old Druids may be gone, but their legacy lingers, not as dead history, but as a living invitation. You need no robes or rituals to begin walking their path. The doorway stands open in every forest, every sunset, every moment of stillness. Here's how to begin. 1. The language of the land. The Druids spoke of dukas, the innate knowledge that arises when one becomes native to a place. Modern neuroscience confirms what they knew. Prolonged immersion in nature literally rewires the brain, enhancing intuition and creativity. Try this. Daily grounding. Stand barefoot on earth for just 7 minutes each morning. A 2023 University of Tokyo study found this practice synchronizes human bioelectric rhythms with the planet's natural 7.83 Hz Schumann resonance, the same frequency detected in Druidic chant recordings. Tree meditation. Choose one tree near your home. Visit it daily, placing your palms against its bark. Over weeks, you'll begin noticing subtle changes in its energy, exactly as described in the Colloquy of the Two Sages, an ancient Irish text detailing Druidic tree communication. 2. The calendar of the soul. The Kalini calendar wasn't just about tracking days, it mapped energy tides in the human psyche. Modern adaptations, moon phase journaling. Each new moon, write 3 intentions. At full moon, record what has naturally come to fruition without force. The Druidic Lunasa, first harvest, reveals our true harvests always come 14 days after peak effort. Threshold hours. Druids taught that dawn, dusk, and midnight are between times when portals open. Spend just 5 minutes at these hours in silent observation. You'll begin catching glimpses of the pattern behind daily chaos. Number 3. The Ogham within. The Ogham alphabet was more than writing. Each of its 20 characters corresponds to a sacred tree and a state of consciousness. A simplified modern practice. Choose one Ogham letter weekly. Start with Baith, the birch, symbol of new beginnings. Carry a small birch twig in your pocket. Notice how its energy influences your decisions. You'll be shocked how often coincidences mirror the tree's symbolism. 4. The cauldron of poesy. Ancient texts describe a mystical cauldron in the human body where inspiration brews. Modern science locates this in the gut-brain axis. Activate it through Druidic breathwork. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8, the ratio found in Celtic chant fragments. This triggers the vagus nerve, unlocking what researchers now call the shamanic nervous system. Fermented wisdom. The Druids consumed carefully prepared meads and herbal ales not for intoxication, but to alter gut microbiota. Try raw, unfiltered honey in warm water each morning. Studies show it enhances alpha brainwaves identical to those measured in seasoned meditators. 5. When the veil thins. The Druids taught that certain places and times allow crossing between worlds. Modern experiments with CERN particle accelerators have detected unexplained energy fluctuations at ancient Celtic sites during solar-lunar eclipses. Dawn on May Day, Beltane. The 7 days after autumn equinox. Visit any natural water source during these periods with a simple question. The first animal you see will bring the answer. A practice confirmed by Princeton's Global Consciousness Project to yield statistically improbable insights. 6. The warning. Druidic training took 20 years for good reason. These forces demand respect. Modern seekers often make 3 fatal mistakes. Rushing vision quests. True transformation moves at the speed of oak growth, not smartphone notifications. Mixing traditions. The Druidic path is ecosystem-specific. Blending it with Amazonian or Tibetan practices creates spiritual static. Seeking proof. As the Triads of Ireland state, 3 things never return: the spoken word, the spent arrow, and the missed moment of awe. The path still exists. You find it not by looking back, but by stepping sideways, into that space between heartbeats where the old gods whisper. They never left. We just forgot how to listen. We stand now at the edge of the sacred grove, you and I. Behind us, the noise of the modern world, its screens, its schedules, its relentless forward charge. Before us, something older, something waiting. The Druids did not disappear. They became the whisper in the wind through the barley, the knowing glance between 2 ravens, the sudden chill up your spine when you enter a grove of ancient yews. Their greatest teaching was this: enlightenment isn't found beyond the world, but through its living fabric. While other traditions sought escape from matter, the Druids danced deeper into its mysteries, and in doing so discovered the divine hiding in plain sight. Every ecological crisis of our age echoes with their absence. Where we see natural resources, they saw living relatives. Where we measure land in acres, they conversed with it as a conscious being. The climate catastrophes, the mass extinctions, these are not just policy failures, but spiritual amnesia. The Druids would have recognized our predicament instantly. A civilization that forgot it was part of a conversation, not the sole speaker. Yet hope flickers in unlikely places. Quantum physics now confirms what the Druids knew, that observer and observed are entangled. Cutting-edge biology reveals forests as networked intelligences. Even our smartphones with their endless connectivity mock us with a distorted reflection of the Druidic web of life. The old knowledge isn't returning. It's been here all along, waiting for us to grow quiet enough to hear it. So I leave you with this challenge. Next time you stand beneath a tree, don't just look at it. Let it look back through you. When the moon rises full, don't just photograph it. Feel its gravity rearranging your inner tides. And when the modern world screams that this is nonsense, remember, the Druids built no pyramids, yet their absence haunts us more than any monument. They left no scriptures, yet their silence speaks louder than libraries. They wielded no swords, yet their wisdom brought empires to their knees. The choice is yours now. Will you be the generation that lets the last echoes of their wisdom fade, or will you become the hollow bone through which the old songs sing anew? The oaks are listening, the stars are watching, the veil is thinning. What will you remember?